Year 2001. I'm with Gerry Dover at my house, and finally, Gerry, 2 months later, we're finally getting to interview you. And you know the way we're going to operate. We start off, who were the Dovers, who were they, when did they come here, and so on. And particularly, why did they come to Ottawa? So, who were the Dovers?
Well, Joe, that my grandfather came. They came through Ellis Island. There were two brothers. My grandfather, John, and his other brother. They were 17 when they landed in New York, went through Ellis Island, and they couldn't speak English. All they could speak was Yiddish and Russian, and they came from Russia. They came, I think, Joe, around 1850 or 1860 when they landed in New York. How they ever ended up in Ottawa, I knew my grandfather was selling Waltham pocket watches on the railroad. And he'd go right from New York City and he'd come up going north, and then they'd go back and forth, both of them. And then they came to Montreal, and they stayed in Montreal. And then my grandfather John came to Ottawa, and what year he would be one of the first Jewish persons in Ottawa. I know his son, Dr. Dover, would be my dad's brother, was the first Jewish boy born in Ottawa. What year, Joe, I do not know. My mother, who was still alive, she just turned 97, and she's got most of all her faculties and definitely has a mind, and she could really tell you more about it than I can. The other brother went up to Chalk River and stayed up in Chalk River, and my great-grandmother had died, and John never remarried. He had 5 children, 4 boys and 2 girls, and one became a doctor, Dr. Dover, and he practiced in Ottawa, and one of the sisters became a registered nurse. The other sister, they both married and went to New York City, and the other Dover stayed. There was my Uncle Mike was in the tire shop on Rideau Street. My Uncle Jack was in the tire shop on Wellington, across from Carter's Delicatessen. And my Uncle Dave worked as a traveler for Loeb for many years. They're all deceased now, except my mother. My mother is the last one left. And just a note that in July of this year, they're having a reunion of all the Dovers on a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, which I'm going to attend. My sister and I will attend.
Where's this going to take place?
The dinner on Saturday night is going to be held at the mill, and they're going to have a picnic in somebody's backyard. I think Eric Cohn, which would be Mina's son, going to have a picnic in the backyard at his house, and it's got to be quite a clan of all the Dovers,
They're coming from all over the states.
They're coming from all over. They've been working on this for over a year, and it's coming at, I think it's near the end of July. I just forget the date. And it'll be all the Dover reunion. On my mother's side, my grandfather, her father, they snuck him out of Russia because they didn't when he was about 12 or 13 years old, and my mother tells me they snuck him out. He was in a hay wagon, and they brought him, and he ended up in Glasgow, Scotland. And he met my grandmother, and they got married, and R.B. Bennett was Prime Minister of Canada at that time, and went over there and said, come to the New World. And they came to Ottawa, and they came and lived in Ottawa. In the old country, he was a tailor, and he worked for remember, for sanitary laundry on Argyle near Bank, and then he got into his own little business as a tailor. She was at a Scotch accent. My mother was born in Ottawa. My mother just turned 97 on May the 7th of 2001. They had another sister, Mary, who's deceased, and a brother by the name of Barney, who's deceased. And I think...
What was the maiden name?
Ross. My mother's maiden name was Ross, R-O-S-S. And she says when they came through customs, the name was Roscus. And the custom official said, we're just going to call you Ross. And my Uncle Barney was in the RCMP. He could be the first Jewish person in the RCMP. My Uncle Barney passed away when he was 87. And I got a picture of him in the RCMP uniform, and he was 19 years old at that time.
Stationed where?
He was stationed in Winnipeg. I got a picture of him in Winnipeg. And we were going to find out whether he would be the first Jewish person in the RCMP. But he didn't like it, and he got out after about 6 months in the RCMP.
Now, you have a pile of cousins here in Ottawa?
We have, there was, in my father's family, there were 5 boys. They were all married. They all had 2 and 3 children. One of the girls was a registered nurse in the Mount Sinai Hospital in New York, and she never had any children. And the other one married Dr. Nathanson from Ottawa, and he was a Park Avenue gynecologist, very famous, and they had 2 children. And in fact, the son became he invented something in gynecology or something that they use today. He would be about 75, 77. His name was Bernard Nathanson. I've seen him on television, on the American television, but other than that, I don't know where he is. And in Ottawa, there was my Uncle Dave had 2 children. My mother, I have an older sister. Dr. Dover had 3 children, and we're all still in Ottawa.
Give me the names of these children. You said 2 children, 3 children, and so on. Dr. Dover
had 3 children.
3 children.
Mina married Morris Cone. Joy married Dr. Fireman, and Martin married a girl from Montreal. They now live in Toronto. My Uncle Dave had 2 children, Myra, who lives in the United States, and Jay, who lives in Ottawa. Jay married Betty Sachs. And my Uncle Mike didn't have any children, did not have any children. And I have an older sister. There was 2 in our family, me and my sister. My sister's older than I am.
Okay.
My Uncle Dave, who would be my dad's brother, he had 2 boys, Bill Dover and Leslie. Leslie got killed in the Second World War, and I think Billy's passed away now. Billy, I heard, passed away a couple of years ago. He married a Greenberg girl.
And they had 3 or 4 boys.
They had 4 boys. 4 boys. They're definitely 4 boys, and I'm pretty sure they're all in Ottawa.
Yeah. Okay. Now, as I was talking to you before the interview, I was very impressed with your dad being a Mason. He was one of the few Masons in Ottawa, Jewish Masons, I'm sure.
My dad, before he got into the business in Ottawa, he worked in around Philadelphia, and in the summertime, after we were finished grade school, we would go and live in around Philadelphia and Reading, Pennsylvania for the summer. Then we'd come back and we'd go to school, and we went to grade school in Ottawa. And down there, he became a 32nd degree Mason. I remember he had a ring also have a book dedicated to my father from down in the States, and I still have it at home. I have it. And I would show it to you, Joe. You know, in the near future, I'll dig it out and show it to you.
I'd appreciate that. Now, how come he got into the hardware business?
Well, he happened to be walking down Spark Street in 1941 with my Aunt Mary, which would be, she married a Dave Hyman, and he was overseas, and he looked across the street, and there was a for rent sign on Plant Hardware. Now, Plant Hardware was in the hardware and sporting goods business at that location for 37 years.
Whereabouts on Spark Street?
187 Spark Street. In between Bank and O'Connor on the north side.
Okay.
And he saw the for rent sign, and he looked at it and said, it'd be, you know, why is he getting out of business? Anyways, Pond Hardware was getting out of business, and my father walked over and said, well, I'll move in, and it's got to be a good location. It's been there for 37 years, and he rented the store, and he didn't have very much money. In fact, I remember him telling me many times, and my mother, that they filled up the shelves up above in empty boxes to make the store look full of merchandise, and they were all just empty boxes. And he opened...
And this was during wartime, too, when stuff was hard to get.
That's right, Joe. He opened the store June 1941.
Huh.
And, you know, it's the old story, you got to be in the right place at the right time, and it was just at the start of the war, and everything sort of, you know, went up, and we were just lucky, and that's it. We're just in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we left Spark Street. I closed Spark Street April the 1st. I vacated Spark Street April the 1st, 1979. That was 37 years later, because they expropriated our property, and my father and I decided, instead of becoming a tenant, that we would move out, and that's when I opened Westboro store in October 1955. And what I did when I left Spark Street is I renovated this Westboro store, and I worked there till I retired in January the 1st, 1996. And my father came to work every single day, 6 days a week. He passed away when he was 89.
And I think you had an employee that was with you for a very long time.
We had an employee, Harold Lee, who worked on Spark Street, and then I put him out in Westboro, and in Westboro, and he worked for us for 28 years. He's deceased now, too.
Yeah. I remember used to go with Gango with fireplaces or something.
We had, I used to go out, we used to make fireplace, or I used to order them out of Toronto, fireplace screens. When you're using your fireplace, for safety, there would be a screen, a mesh screen in front of your fireplace, and we'd have to, some people wanted them sort of built right into the fireplace opening. So to make sure that the measurements were correct, I would go out after supper with my friend Abe Steinberg and Sammy Shapiro, and we would measure. I'd measure maybe 6, 7 fireplaces all over the city at night to make sure that the measurements were correct, and then they'd make them in Toronto, and then we delivered them to the people. Sometimes they installed them, or we would install them. I will have to say that during those years, that we would be the biggest seller of fireplace fixtures, most likely in Canada. We sold all apparatus. Now, when you buy a house, most of these glass screens come with the house.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You mentioned Mina. She's a judge, isn't she?
Is that so?
Mina?
Mina was she was an immigration judge. Mina Cohen became she's retired now.
Oh, I didn't know that.
She's retired, and she comes and visits my sister the odd time. My sister's in Hillel with my mother.
Yes, yes. Okay. Now, growing up, where did you live? Where did your immediate family live? All the time? Not all the time in the Glebe?
My mother says when I was born, I was born on Halloween, October 31st, 1929, and my mother said my grandfather owned a house at the corner of McLaren and Kent Street, a big house, and that's where Dr. Dover also had his office. We lived there upstairs for a few years, or maybe a year. And then my mother bought a house on 2nd Avenue, 348 2nd Avenue. It's a corner, it's on the southeast corner of 2nd Avenue and Chrysler. Chrysler is 1 block from Bronson. She bought that house in 1930, and we moved. I was 1 year old. And I still own that house at 348 2nd Avenue.
Yeah.
I'm still there.
Yeah. So what schools did you go to then?
I went to Mutchmor Public School from kindergarten to grade 6. And then I went to Glashan for 7 and 8, which is on Kent Street. In fact, my mother grew up on McLeod, and she went to Glashan. And then after Glashan, I went to Glebe Collegiate High School. And then after that, I went to the University of Ottawa. But I worked in the store when I was going through high school and also through university. And I played a lot of hockey. I've got great hockey pictures. In fact, when I was going to public school, we won the Ottawa District Public School. I played high school hockey. And then I played junior hockey for Eastview St. Charles for maybe a month, but they would have to travel to some other town. And I would get home maybe at 3 o'clock in the morning, and that, my mother said that's the end of my hockey, going out of town. I had to get an education to play instead of playing hockey.
Yeah. Anything notable about classmates in public school, high school?
No, but I did go to university with, of course, my name was Harvey D. Gay, who became Assistant Deputy Minister of Revenue Canada. I grew up with the Dunlaps, Harry Dunlap, who's my age, Jake Dunlap, who was a good football player with the Ottawa Rough Riders. He became a lawyer. And Frank Dunlap, who became a judge, played with the Toronto Argos and Ottawa Rough Riders, and he became a judge. I still see them. I play golf now at Rideau-View. I've been there 30 years, 35 years, and I still play golf with Harry Dunlap. Harry, they live 5 doors from us on 2nd Avenue. They bought that house. They moved on the 2nd in 1926, and we moved in 1930.
Yeah.
I still see Harry, and I still play golf with Harry.
You see Jake often?
I see Jake quite often now, yeah.
Well, you can tell him this story, because this is a classic. Ray Tubman was his mentor. Like, he used to always like Jake when he was going through school and all that. And when they opened up their office, that was in the Guaranteed Trust. You remember upstairs?
That's right.
So Jake, they wanted to outfit their office, but they didn't have too much money. So Ray Tubman gave him chairs and a desk and so on. Anyway, Jake went in one time to Tubman's office and says, "Ray, I've got a real problem." He said, "What's the matter, Jake?" He says, "I don't know. Maybe you can help me." And knowing Jake, you can just see how he played this up. He says, "What's the problem?" He says, "Oh, I don't know if you can help me." He said, "Well, what's the problem?" He says, "I've got to go to Almont or Armpar, I'm not sure." He says, "I've got to give a talk. I wonder if you can help me." He said, "Well, what is it you want me to do?" He says, "Well, I want you to come with me. Is it all right, Ray?" He says, "Sure, I'll come with you. What do you want me to do?" He says, "Well, this talk." He said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" He says, "Well, I've got a talk." And he said, "Well, what's your talk going to be?" He says, "It's going to be on hemorrhoids, and I need an arsehole on the stage." Well, Tubman chased Dunlop up to Somerset and Bank.
That would be Jake. Jake and still is today, a very great after-dinner speaker. Jake is about 75 now, going to be 76.
Yeah.
And he's still right across, he's well known across Canada from his football days with the Argos and the Ottawa Rough Riders.
Well, I can still remember the shtick with Sammy Kaufman.
That's right, he was a great friend of Sammy, and the people still, from Vancouver, still want Jake to come as an after-dinner speaker. Very, very, I knew the parents. When I was a little kid, they'd invite me over for dinner, and to me, they were a great family. Another person who I met playing golf, and many years ago, I've known him for the last 40 years, would be Saul Samuels. He was Assistant Deputy Minister of Justice when Trudeau was Minister of Justice, and then the next promotion, he was Commissioner of all the judges in Canada. He traveled right across, and I still play golf with him today. He's not at Rideauview, he's at the Highlands Golf Course, but we play 5 or 6 times a year.
Yeah. You lived in the Glebe, and one of the characters in the Glebe was Mutchmor and his store. Now, there are all kinds of legends. Who was the character that brought the horse into this?
Much was a little older than I am, but I do remember the store. It was, I think it was around Catherine Street. No, it was on, I think it was on cross, just forget, on O'Connor Street. It was on O'Connor near the auditorium. And he had a little confectionery store, and in those days, during the war, there was a team called the Ottawa Commandos and the Ottawa Army, and Kenny Reardon, then he went up to the Montreal Canadiens, played in Ottawa for the Commandos, Milt Schmidt, Dumart, Bauer. I remember as a kid going to Rush End and spending, I think, 25 cents to see, in those days, they were all played NHL hockey. The Koval and the two Koval brothers and Shabicki. The goalie was Sugar Jim Henry and Chuck Rayner. And Mush got to know all these hockey players. And one day, in those days, the bread wagons and the milk wagons were pulled by a horse. And Reardon, who is still living today, married Senator Raymond's daughter in Montreal. He brought a horse right into the front door.
Well, Mush was sleeping there, wasn't he?
Well, that's right. Mush lived there part of the time instead of going home. And Reardon brought the horse right into the store, He unhitched. I don't know what it was. I wasn't there. I didn't see it, but you hear that story, that he unhitched a horse from the wagon and brought it right into the store, Mush's store. And I think everybody in the city knew that story about Mush. And Mush is deceased now, but even when Reardon played many years for Montreal Canadiens, they were still very, very good friends.
The Ottawa U, any good stories, Ottawa U?
Well,
that was the time of the Oblates were running it.
I was going to Glebe, and I was in 5th form, and I missed one subject. I missed mathematics in grade 13, and I was going to go back to Glebe, and Harry Dunlap, who was always a year ahead of me, went to St. Pat's. The Dunlaps all went to St. Pat's in those days, and this was 1950. And Dunlap said, well, gee, Gerry, don't go back to Glebe. Come on over to Ottawa. You play hockey. And he said, maybe you'll get, I was a pretty good hockey player, not blowing my own horn, but my drawback is that there were no contact lenses in those days, and I had to wear glasses. And I filled out a form to get a scholarship to University of Ottawa if I play hockey. And I filled out a form, and I mailed it to Ottawa U, and they gave me a half a scholarship to go to Ottawa U if I would play hockey for the University of Ottawa. And I accepted, and I went, and I took business administration, and I got out in 1953. I graduated in 1953, and I've been working ever since. I work 6 days a week. I have no regrets. If I had to do it over again, I would live my life the same way. I have no regrets. I had great parents. Anything that I have today, I owe to my father and my mother.
As a matter of fact, Gerry, when I went to Ottawa U, I had some of the priests that you had, and I think of two of them. One was Father Amel, the French teacher, and then there was Father Sweatshirt. He was the registrar. Huh?
They were most of the teachers I had were priests. The odd layman did teach over there. I never had any problem with my religion. Nobody tried to convert me from Catholicism, from Judaism to Catholicism. Nobody ever mentioned it. I enjoyed my 3 years that I was at Ottawa U. One funny story is we had to take French, and actually in those days going to high school, every day you took a half an hour of French and you could count to 10. And we had to take French and pass a French exam at the end of the year. And I remember the English guys, there was Brian Armishaw and Ron Burke and a few others, and the priests in those days lived in the big building, the main building, which is still at Ottawa U. They lived way up on the top floor. And I was selected to go up to Father Amel, who was, to me, a great individual. He would sort of maybe tell us what's on the final exam. So I went up, and I said, Father, I said, you know, the English guys will never be able to pass a French exam. We're going to pass every exam but French. And Father Amel said, well, Gerry, I think you should study page 98. I think that could be a question on the exam. Then I think, Gerry, you better study page 142. That's another question that could be on the exam. And I would study page 210. That's another question that's on the exam. Anyways, in those days we wrote in a big gymnasium. Naturally, there was maybe 100 people in there writing from Notre Dame convert and different schools. And we get to the French exam, and what's on the French exam is page 98, 102, and 2. And all we did was memorize it. And all we got as a pass was 55. we all expected to get about 98. All we got was 55.
You know, those were, I think, honeymoon years as far as I'm concerned, because sure, there was wartime, but it didn't mean too much, the war.
Well, it was, when I got to Ottawa U, I got there in 1950, September.
It was over.
Naturally, the war was over.
Yeah, yeah.
And the story I just told you, Joe, about going to see Father Amel, getting the French, we had to take French for 2 years.
Yes.
And come to the end of the next year, I did the same thing. I went up to Father Amel and told him, I said, Father, the English guys will never, the only subject we're going to fail is French. And he told me the same thing. What pages to study? Sure enough, we get into the gym, they hand up the exam papers, and it's exactly the same. But nobody got hired at 55.
Well, you didn't care?
No, well, 50 was a pass in those days. All we got was 55. But he was a great, another story.
A humanitarian, when you stop to think of it.
Yes, he was. Another story I got there when I first got to Ottawa U, we were playing basketball. It was just a pickup game, and there was a little guy running around, young guy, this and that, and we were sort of cursing and swearing and playing basketball. And about 3 days later, I go to class, and who's sitting up front in Habit, the priest. His father's name was Father Trudeau. He was the same person who I played basketball with, and we were cursing and swearing. And I went up to him and I said, Father, I'm sorry. I apologize for all the bad language I lose when we were playing basketball. And he said, Gerry, don't worry about it. He said, never mind. And I had him the 3 years I was out of U, I had him every year for accounting, plus other professions I've had there.
Father Amel, he made us learn the Lord's Prayer in French. And before every test, he'd stand up and say, you all have to say, Our Father, because that you need all the help you can get.
In those days, Joe, when we get to Ottawa U, you had to take religion. But naturally, being of the Jewish faith, I never did take religion. So I was let out of that class all the time.
No, I never had any problems at Ottawa U. It's funny, religion wasn't a big thing. Now it's a big thing.
Yeah, bilingualism, Joe, and the French and everything is naturally, you see what has happened in the last number of years. But when I was there in 1950 and 53, we never had any problem whatsoever. Never had any problem.
No. So now the tape, this side is almost finished, and I'll just turn it over, and we'll talk about the war years in the store. The stores that are no longer on Spark Street, people that you used to work with, restaurants that were still, there were hangouts. There were very few places that people could go to. There were no community. About some of the places on Spark Street that are no longer in existence.
Joe, I worked on Spark Street about 30 years of my life, 6 days a week. I remember the restaurants across the street. Right across the street from us was the Cavendish restaurant, and upstairs was the Ottawa Bridge Club. Down the street going towards Bank was the Venetian Suites, who would go in there and eat the odd time. Going up east, there was the Estoril restaurant. The Tea Gardens was there.
On the same side that you were, right?
The Tea Garden was on the north side, just close to O'Connor's. On the corner, there was Carson's restaurant at the corner of Sparks and Bank. The Plaza Hotel and the Plaza Restaurant. When I first started to work, there was across the street was Kresge's, and the Kresge sold out the Woolworths, and I used to go in and eat my lunch there. The Metropolitan store was there. The best place was the Iowana Lunch, which was, you know where that was, across from your cigar store. I used to go in there. It was always sort of self-service, and I remember Stan Lewis, the old mayor, would come in. Dave Gill, the old president of the Hockey Club. All the gentlemen would come in and sit there, and Tubman would smoke a cigar. And I remember a person would come in, he was a little bit under the weather, had a few drinks, and he'd wander up to the counter and get his food, sit down beside us, and Tubman would always take his cigar and flick his ashes onto the guy's plate, and the guy was under the weather. He would sit there and he would eat the ashes, and but it was a great place to eat. It was owned by Denny Ford. I remember the father, and I think they're all deceased now. And the stores was, I think the only store left now on Spark Street would be E.R. Fisher's now. They're the only store. Burke's, but Burke's are out of business. All the Burke's was bought out.
Yeah.
People's Credit were across the street. They were bought out. Davis Agency is gone. The Camera Shop.
Murphy Gamble is gone.
Murphy Gamble's. Bryson Graham's was where the restaurant Yesterday's is. Right to the east of us was Orm's. I knew Jimmy Orm very well, and when television would come out, I would go next door and look at television and see the baseball games. I think Jimmy's deceased, but they were Orms. To the west of us was Lindsay's store. I knew Lindsay's. I went to high school with the two boys, Jimmy Lindsay and Chuck Lindsay. They're gone, and it was a great street. In those days, if you went shopping, you went to Bank Street, Spark Street, Rideau, and the Market.
Yeah,
There were no shopping centers in those days.
and there was always action on the street.
The Saturday was always there. This was before the mall now, you know. A lot of people, you know, criticize the mall, but I'll tell you that the mall was it may not be now, but it was, I'd say, the best retail street in the city of Ottawa when that mall became a mall. The American tourist was, you know, changing of the guard was good, and Saturday was by far our busiest day of the year.
Hindsight is always 20/20, Gerry. Remember when the city was against night shopping and holiday shopping and so on, and drove a lot of businesses out of town? Had they relaxed, do you think it would have been, you know, a plus?
Well, I think, Joe, the biggest and foremost problem is parking. You can go into, you know, when Westgate was built, you could go in there and park. You can park for 3 hours for nothing. Even today, Joe, I still do. Our store did business with the Bank of Nova Scotia, but our private bank was the province of Ontario. There is only one in the city. It's still at the same location. It's on the north side, right near O'Connor. The Bank of Montreal is on the corner, then a couple of booth building, and then bank. I still get our old age checks and all our checks direct deposit. I go up once a month to Spark Street. I put my car on a parking lot, or where the old Capitol Theatre was off Queen Street. I'm there for 35 minutes. It cost me $4.50 to park my car. Yeah. And it's the parking that is the problem with the uptown. Now, Monday through Friday, if you draw a radius of a mile from the Parliament buildings, there's a great many people who work up there. Offices, government employees, lawyers. It's, you know, but whether they shop up there today, I don't think they do.
Yeah,
they go to shopping centers to shop.
Yeah. The Connaught restaurant was a favorite for you guys.
Connaught restaurant, that's right. Was
Morley always loved that.
Right. We always went to the Connaught restaurant to eat at night after, you know, sometimes we'd go to the Gatineau pub when we were young and play golf or stay there and see the show, or we'd go to the Connaught restaurant. I still see the lady, I just forget her name. She married the owner from the Connaught. In fact, she went to Glebe with me. I just forget her name. And I still see her the odd time. The husband, first husband from the Connaught died. She remarried. Another store who's still there is Zeller's on the corner. Zeller's is still there today than it was when I was up above it was a bowling alley called Carrie's Bowling Alley.
That's right. And Budge was there, wasn't he?
I still see Budgie, that's right. Budge, way out in Westboro now.
Yeah.
He was Ottawa's one of the top pool players. Above, near Spark Street, was the Shamrock, I think, pool room. Up above, we used to go there the odd time and shoot pool. In those days, it was a great street. In fact, to tell you the truth, the best year that Dover's Hardware ever had was 1975. That's business-wise,
yes,
volume-wise.
Yes, yes.
And then the government expropriated all that property, and then we left in '79.
Yeah, had they not expropriated you, would it still been there? Business changed,
well, I don't know whether I would still own the property. My father owned that property. And
no, but I say business-wise, there were a lot of changes.
Well, a lot of changes. I don't know whether I would have rented the store. I don't think I would still be there. I may still be there instead of leaving Spark Street altogether and going to Westboro. I may still be there, or I may rent the property, or, you know, that's, you know, hindsight, I can't tell you. They say hindsight's 20/20, but I don't know, you know.
No, but I'm thinking like these big box stores like Home Depot and all these Rona and so on. See, I went through this too. I used to have pipes, and I'd have one of each kind. And when Freeman's opened up in Shopper City East, he had a bulletin board, must be about 50 feet, pegboard, 50 feet long, filled with pipes. He had more pipes on there than I sold in all my life. And you couldn't compete with a guy like that.
That's right, Joe. I agree with you. We were an independent hardware store, and we sold sporting goods, and I sold golf clubs. But now there's, to begin with, the specialty shop. We sold skis, we sold ski boots. But there's specialty shop now, and this particular sells skis, they sell golf clubs and nothing else. But you're right, these big box stores are, there's no way that these little home hardware can compete with Rona. I've been in a Rona, I've been in Home Depot. There's a new one coming in now from the United States called Builder's Box. You may have seen it advertised on TV. Another big mega store. Canadian Tire seemed to compete with them. You know, but they've got 460 stores across Canada, so their buying power. But there's no way, Joe, you need a tube of glue, you know, LaPage glue for $1.98. You'll go into a little home hardware. But if you need an item $200, $300, $400, $500, where are you going to go to check the prices?
Yeah.
You've got to go to these mega stores.
Yeah.
You need a snow blower for $350, $400. You're going to go to Rona. You're going to go to Home Depot. You're going to go to Canadian Tire. There's no way that these little stores, the retail business today, and every business is very, very competitive. Very competitive now.
Talking about competition, I remember we got into a price war. The market was selling cigarettes almost at cost. So we were at 96 Bank. So we were buying cigarettes at $2.90 and selling them for $2.96. And at $2.96 we also threw in matches, okay? And at Christmas time we would wrap it for you, and we would even deliver, you know, like when there was a pile of water. Why were we in this price war? Because Mike Comerford and Richie's got into war. So we were working for 6 cents a carton, and I'd say about 10% or 20% of the business guys in the government, Joe, I'm a little short of cash. Put it on my bill. So I put down Gerry, and I'd have the tag, your carton of cigarette. When I sold the store, we had a stack about 4 inches high with Gerry, Bill, Sam, just first name. I didn't know who the hell the guys never bothered coming back in. Worked for that. Now, you may remember another name, Mike Warner. He comes in, he says, you're selling cigarettes for $2.96. How much are you making on it? I said, well, you know what I'm paying at Lowe's. He said, I can let you have cigarettes cheaper than Lowe's, $2.89. So I said, yeah, hot, eh? He said, schmuck, I'll give you a bill and everything. And sure enough, he gave me bills, and it was all kosher. I didn't know how he was getting the cigarettes. He had run up, you know, like he bought for $100, paid off the 100, then bought for 1,000, bought 1,000. Well, when he left, he owned a fortune of money, but I was, you know, he was supplying everybody. Everybody was buying cigarettes. In those days, it's hard to believe you were working for 6 cents, and you said thank you. You sold a newspaper for a nickel or 10 cents, and I sold comic books. We were the largest newsstand in Ottawa at that time, and it was written up when Old Yeller, you remember that movie Old Yeller? We sold more comics than anybody in Canada. Ray let us put a table in the lobby, and we sold like hell. We sold for 10 cents. We made 2 cents on a book, you know. But it was fun. We were enjoying ourselves, you know.
That's right, Joe. That's right. It was fun. To do it today, I don't think you couldn't get along. And
No.
Couldn't do it today. That's why I say business is so competitive in every business today. And the style of even grocery stores now. How many stores have gone by they've cut down. Fishers now were moved out of Bayshore.
Devlin's gone.
They're all gone because people do not dress the way they used to dress.
Okay, let's leave that for a second. I also, when you mentioned restaurants, Shimmy Dayton's.
Shimmy Dayton, that's right. Shimmy Dayton, Dayton's restaurant, way out where Carling Avenue and Richmond Road meet.
Yeah.
That's right. He had a restaurant, and we used to go out there to eat sometimes. And Westboro, he'd come in and visit me in Westboro the odd time. I think he could speak Jewish as well as any Jewish person.
That's right.
I think he was Polish, so they maybe very close language together. But I knew Shimmy pretty well. That's right. Yeah.
I remember also a story with like talking about speaking Jewish. I remember you and Marley and what's his name from Canada Packers.
Alec LaFleur.
No. That's Lefty you were talking about.
Lefty, yeah.
No, but this was the guy from Canada Packers. You remember you took him out drinking the shicker and you were in a nightclub or something and he told a story and everybody laughs and you were sitting there and more than kicks you, lach, pots, lach.
I can't remember, Joe.
What?
I can't remember the guy's name. Canada Packers.
Canada Packers.
I can't remember his name.
I told that to Marley and he was laughing. He said, yeah, I remember that.
I can't remember the guy's name.
Remember, how often, today, everything is a chore. How often you'd stand on, I didn't have a car at that time. I didn't start driving until I got married, 20 years later. But I remember many times on a Sunday, let's go into Montreal just for a steak, or drive into Augsburg for a bowl of chili. You don't do things like that anymore.
Of course, you got to remember, Joe, there's a little different in age now. We're all in our 70s.
I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. But even the young people don't do that like they used to do.
Well, that's right. They're different. There's a lot more activities for younger people to do now. Tennis and golf and boating and swimming and horseback riding, and they go to ball games and they play ball in the wintertime. It's all the kids and their grandchildren play hockey and etc. The city now with this mega city, Joe. We're over 1 million people now. You go to the outlying districts and go to the Outaouais. You're close to 1.5 million people in the city of Ottawa now. There's a lot to do. But again, let me give you one. They spell it O-L-D. We're old, Joe.
I'm not old. You may be getting
well, no, Joe. I admit that I'm in my 70s now.
No, I'm getting aged, but I'm not old.
Yeah,
like good wine that gets aged.
The golden years are not too golden, Joe.
Well, Gordy once sent me a poem, and I remember only the last 2 lines. And the golden years have come to pass. The golden years can kiss my ass.
That's right. The golden years are a little rusty, Joe.
Yeah. Now, gin rummy. You're still playing gin rummy, but I remember the wonderful gin rummy games that were in the houses. And what killed them was the entertainment, the food afterwards.
Well, it also, besides that, Joe, we have it in the houses. I remember that we had it in everybody's houses. But in the wintertime, they come in with the dirty snow boots.
That was a minor thing. It would start off just with some peanuts on the table. And the next time, there were some sandwiches on the table. Then at the end, the women were cooking,
You're right. What we have done since I've retired, we've rented an office upstairs right near my store in the West End. We have about 14 or 15 members. We pay $30 a month. Everybody pays $30 a month. I sign a year lease, and I mail them a check, and I collect the money. And in the winter time, we're up there every day. Sometimes we play gin. We have 10 guys, 8 guys. We don't gamble. It's just playing gin for a very nominal fee. it's a place to go. Sometimes we just go up there and kibitz all the time.
Yeah.
We'll sit there for 2-3 hours reminiscing about the old days. And Larry Regan's as a member. Larry won the Calder Rookie Award for the best rookie in the National Hockey League in 1957. Lou Check, who played many years with the Chicago Blackhawks and Ottawa Senators. He's about 82. He comes up.
Lou Check used to supply me with liquor.
That's right. Lou Check, you're right, Joe. Lou Check worked for Harem Walker.
Yeah.
And he's a member of our club. And Sammy Shapiro, Sammy Goff, played with the New York Rovers for many years in New York. Grew up with Arthur Kizzle in Kemptville. He knows Arthur. They were kids and grew up with Arthur Kizzle. And we got Donnie Thomas, who had an abattoir, and in fact they sold kosher, they were a supplier of kosher food in Ottawa. And we play there all the time. We play every Wednesday night.
Now, gin rummy games in the olden days, that, when I started talking about gin rummy, I thought of Cowboy, Butowski,
Cowboy,
and Wolf, Peekaboo,
Sam Balin, Stash, Stash, worked in the Mint, Gangster, Abe Steinberg, yourself, me, Sammy Shapiro, Herbie Gozowitz, Morty Goldfield, Then I remember we got Phil Killeen. Phil Killeen became president of Algonquin College. Joe Poirier played many years with the Ottawa Rough Riders. Wick Tucker came and played gin with us. Not that we gambled for big money. It was just the idea of getting together once a week.
Just schmoozing,
Just the kibitz.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I always envied you guys, and you were always good because you would reminisce after each trip. The trips that you guys took are part of legend. Like the trips with Mike Imbro, those are legendary.
Oh, yeah. Mike Imbro, you mentioned Mike Werner. Mike Werner came from New York, and he ended up in Montreal, and then came to Ottawa. He was a bit of a Damon Runyon character, but he was a very, very honest individual when it came to us, to Sammy and Morley and I. Never said a bad word about us, never did any harm to us. The same with Imbro. Mike Imbro was sort of a loud individual, but he was
funny.
He was a square shooter. He was a funny guy. And if you go look at the restaurants today, how many Italian restaurantes there are today, Imbro was 50 years ahead of these guys.
Yeah. And the stories, about if somebody came in and asked for some salt on the meat, he would throw them out, or pepper in the sauce.
One story, Joe, I remember about, I was going to Ottawa U, and I had an exam in the morning, and I had an exam in the afternoon. So after the exam in the morning, I went down to Imbro's to have something to eat at noon hour, and I had an exam at 1 o'clock. So I took the book that I had to, I just was leafing through it, the exam I had in the afternoon, and I was sitting in Imbro's on Lido Street, and a lady came in and sat down and waited on, and all of a sudden Mike comes rushing out of the kitchen. He had the big hat on, the white hat, and he had a dirty apron on it, and he gave that lady hell because the lady ordered fish. And he said, you don't come into an Italian restaurant to order fish. And Joe, that stuck in my mind. That's got to be 1952, and I remember that like it was yesterday.
Well, Jack Goldfield told the story. He went in because, where they were, it was close by to the shop, so he went in for something to eat. So he sat down and ordered an egg sandwich. Same thing.
Same story.
He ran out. He said, not only you don't order egg sandwich, but at lunchtime you're taking up space.
That's Mike Imbro. Here's another Damon Runyon character.
Yeah. Now, the stories, that would come back when you went to New York, you saw just about every show there was. You really would come back with some beautiful stories of your trips. Mike, when he was in Italy, gave out business cards to everybody. You know, when you come to Ottawa, you come to work for me. You know, and the other story that you know, these things stay in your mind 50 years later. When you were in London, you got out of the taxi and you told Gordy to pay the cab.
Gordy Froman.
And the guy the cabbie started shouting and screaming.
We didn't know the currency. We didn't know how to move the currency back. Gordy couldn't move the currency back and forth. I think he tipped him about 2 cents.
Yeah, 2 pennies, the big ones.
That's why the guy was cursing and swearing at Gordy. That's right. I remember that.
The stories. Now, golf. You mentioned Lefty. He used to come into the store, Lefty, all the time, and he'd pick up papers and so on. And golf is still. Do you still play golf a lot?
Joe, I still play golf. I play on. We play every Tuesday, every Wednesday, and Saturday and Sunday. I play 4 times a week now. I'm a member of Rideau Golf Course, and I play other golf courses when I'm invited, and I invite guys back. And that is about the only exercise. I walk a dog. I have a dog. I walk a dog every morning and every night. I have a little schnauzer.
Yeah.
And that's the extent. I watch television. I read the papers, and but that's. My knees are not the greatest, Joe, anymore. I take anti-inflammatory pills for arthritis in my knees, but I get around.
Yeah.
I get around.
Yeah. Any trips lately?
No, Joe, I haven't been away in a couple of years. I've gone to Florida, but in the last couple of years I've sort of had a lot on my plate, and I just couldn't seem to get away.
Yeah.
As I said before, my mother and sister are in Hillel, and sometimes my mother take week turns and etc. So I stay around. But
yes.
God willing, I hope next winter I'll go to Florida for a month and play a little golf.
Yes. Gordy, my brother Gordy came back from Portugal. Apparently, that's the cheapest place to go in Europe now.
I've been to Portugal, and I've been to Spain, and but Joe, like the sun, you know, the Dovers were very, very fair. I was redheaded when I was a kid, and the sun really kills my skin. Even today, I play golf with a long sleeve shirt, and I put a lot of stuff on my face, my nose, and etc. And I go on a holiday. I don't go into shopping centers. I worked all my life in a store.
Yeah.
I go to play golf. I grant you, I don't walk the beaches. I don't go swimming. I play golf, and that's what I like to do in Florida.
Yeah. Okay, looking back, well, before we say any more, I'm going to get the 3 of you together. You'll come over, or I'll meet you guys at the center. Morley's at the center often, so you and Sam and Morley, and I can tape you upstairs, like, you know, we'll just sit around and schmooze, because he had a whole pile of stories. He said, yeah, but that would be a good one when Gerry is there. You know, he didn't want to do anything. So looking ahead, looking back, we could fill up a whole tape, you know, just what if or maybes and so on. So I know you're on a time limit. You want to get to see your mom. I can't thank you enough. This tape is going to go into the archives, and at least we're going to know a little bit more about the Dovers, other than what the official, well-scrubbed versions are going to be. Harry Dover was my doctor. As a matter of fact, we talked about him.
That's my dad's brother.
We talked about, when I had my bar mitzvah, I remember invited the lawyer, the doctor, the dentist, everybody was invited to every bar mitzvah, every simcha, and Dr. Dover was one of the, you know, like, honored guests. I remember.
I think the Dr. Dover and Dr. Sam Mercy were the first two Jewish doctors in Ottawa.
Well, he was the first Jewish coroner.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all in all, thank you very much, and hopefully we'll be able to do this again.